There's something interesting that you had brought up,
Yeah.
and I think we'd like to share, which is about carbon credits, the carbon credit situation in Kenya. Now, for me,
Really in Africa, to be honest.
in Africa,
Yeah. But anyway, let's just zero in.
yeah. So for our viewers, I'd like you to give us an intro into first getting an overview of carbon credits, and now particularly to why we're bringing it up here is we want to understand with regards to these carbon credits agreements, the voluntary. How
Markets.
binding is it on the voluntary on the markets? The license does it really just act as a get out of jail for free card for companies or countries that are still continuing to pollute? And who sets the price and the standards?
Okay. So let's break it down. Let's break it down from what it is to why I think this is a very important piece. So let's start with carbon credits to just kind of begin to understand the whole space and what that means. Greenhouse gases, particularly gases such as CO2, really punch holes in the ozone, as you said. But they also it causes a lot of climate shifts and climate change, things like global warming, melting of the ice caps, and so on and so forth, as has been actually, quote unquote, scientifically justified. Some might say proven, but yeah, scientifically backed. So I think the nations around in the Paris Climate Agreement came together to say, hey, we want to extract a lot more CO2 in the market. And so we want to build an incentive structure around this so that companies that are, not companies, like countries and actually also companies that are actively engaging in the efforts of extracting CO2 can find a market for those guys who are polluting and adding a lot more CO2 in the market so that they can offset the imbalance of the pollution versus what's being
extracted. How do they
extracted.
extract the CO2?
That is a good thing. So you extract CO2 by doing certain things such as planting trees, living conservancies without overly developing them. Actually, a shift to electric cars, e-mobility, that's also a huge trend that's being justified as well towards CO2 emissions, because you see electric vehicles do not really emit a lot of CO2. So these companies and these countries that are heavy polluters, and we're talking about mostly the Western world and a lot of the developed, actually even the East, when we're talking about China, a lot of the heavily industrialized and polluting countries are finding a market in countries that are, quote unquote, offsetting the emissions by doing these activities. And so how it's done is that carbon credits are actually priced at metric tons of carbon, of CO2. So if you can be able to make a case and validate that a particular metric ton of CO2 has been extracted, that typically is sold for around, it's supposed to be typically sold for around $40 to $80. And that is now what is referred to as a carbon credit. And so companies and states and organizations and companies engage in the activity of buying those carbon credits to have it on themselves as their efforts to pretty much offset their pollution. So that is the framework, that is the groundwork. But there's a couple of things that's very interesting and very broken about this whole ecosystem. And yeah, I'm not an activist, I'll start by saying that, but I think it's a very interesting thing. I can't say, man. But here's the thing. When you come to the ground, number one, the price is rarely what people say. So these things usually sell for different rates, because at the end of the day, you're trying to tell sovereign states what they need to agree on for a price for carbon credits. You really can't technically do that. I can always take, the way in Kenya we say hatuwezi kosania bei. Yeah, we'll always price it at whatever we feel is comfortable. And so what essentially happens is that a lot of the buyers of carbon credits end up being the ones, in my opinion, who set the price for what the carbon credits need to be priced at. And what does that do? So in my opinion, it still gives them the license to continue polluting. It really does it. It really, what's essentially happening on the ground is the countries that are still polluting are still now gonna overpollute, because they can still be able to squeeze in and negotiate rates for carbon credits that work for them. So essentially that's them getting a license to continue polluting. And the whole purpose in the beginning of the day, which was reducing CO2 emissions, in my opinion, is becoming like a whole moot exercise. And it's a very difficult thing to try and say that, hey, we want to price carbon credits at a particular amount or a particular value. You have to bring on the table and put that in agreement, let's say in one of these UN council things. But then again, how do you enforce that? Like it's a voluntary market, and it's very hard to be able to, like, I think, set the price on a regulatory level.
Yeah, so I was going to ask then why is it that pricing, why is it that pricing is particularly a problem if two states can agree on how much they're going to charge?
Yes. So
if we know how can quantify the level of pollution and the level of the carbon credit to be, if we can give that equivalency between the two, then isn't pricing just between the two states?
Yes. Pricing, I think it's a problem because, you see, there's always a secondary goal here. Pricing was supposed to create an incentive structure, but the underlying goal was to reduce emissions, right? But if I can be able to buy my carbon credits for cheap, that means I can just factor that as a COGS, like as a piece of COGS for whatever company I'm doing. So for all the data centers or all the cars that Tesla is gonna produce, as long as they know they can always get, like, 2.3 million metric tons from Kenya for like $10 per ton, that's a small $23 million spend for 10 years of production. Like,
but isn't that okay as long as the offset
so the thing
and
is,
the pollution match?
The thing is, it's not about the offset and the pollution matching. It's about there really isn't any incentive for these guys to emit less. There's really isn't any incentive for these guys to pollute less. So at the end of the day, we're still back to quote unquote where we started. Another thing, and there's another problem as well. There's one problem that I haven't talked about, is that who really reaps the benefits of carbon credits? So let's say if me, I'm Kenya and I've sold my carbon credits to Facebook and Meta and Netflix, etc. Does this really translate back down to the communities or the taxpayers, or how is this structured all the way back down to become a benefit? Because you see, to say that we've planted trees, that means that's land that we could use for, setting up a factory, or that's land that we could use for farming or grazing or whatever. And it also spills down into like a story about this conservancy that's in northern Kenya called, I think it's called NRT, Northern Rangelands Trust. And these guys manage land the size of Slovakia to do this. Yeah, Slovenia or Slovakia. I don't know. It's one of those lands.
It's Slovenia.
Yeah, but it's Slovenia. But anyway, they manage land the size of that to do this thing called rotational grazing, which is essentially telling the communities not to graze at a particular place because we want the grass there to, absorb as much CO2, quote unquote. And there's such a humongous chain of middlemen intermediating that conservancy and that whole operation that the gains that go back to the community for the piece of land that they're having to forgo for their quote unquote traditional things is like, it's like peanuts, man. It's like this whole incentive structure is broken at the core because of the benefiting players. One, it doesn't meet the goal that it needs to. And then two, the people who are actually paying for the price of the carbon credits never reap the benefits of it. So that's my argument about why it's broken.
I think I have to disagree with you there, but not entirely. I think say that it hasn't addressed the issue with regards to pollution. Where it's like we're back to where we started. I don't think that's the case because, like we said, if someone has put in the effort to the plant trees as with the incentive of offsetting the pollution in order to get the carbon credits, then we are not at where we began because whoever was still polluting to create whatever goods and products or whatever they were doing, whatever business services they were providing, that was still going to continue. But we still have the product. Where I agree with you is specifically in this case, once again, where someone has paid the cost, but it's not the conservancy. It's the people who were using that land. So my problem there is not so much with, I wouldn't say it's broken to the core at its core. for me, I see it as a problem of somewhat governance, because in a sense, if that land is meant to be for grazing, what is someone going to do
So you and I both
appropriating
know.
that land for something else?
Exactly. You and I both know. We're very free market type people. This at its core is very socialist, in my opinion. Yeah, like at least from the guys who are selling. See,
Is someone not making money?
yeah, like people are not gonna make money. Like the communities are never gonna make money out of it. It's always the government, and even then,
It's the government.
It's the-
no
yeah.
private enterprise
No,
offers a service
so they
to sell
ask-
carbon credits.
Well, I'll leave that for actually the audience to kind of confirm that detail, but you can fact check me on that. I am very certain that the biggest players in terms of supply of carbon credits and the guys who are selling are either mediated or intermediated by the government. And so the government has a say in how much is being made and also how the funds are going to be received. Number two, even the companies and the organizations that are doing that are almost rarely the ones responsible for the efforts that are going for setting up the carbon credits. So you'll find that somebody will sell carbon credits, but it's because they've, let's say, consolidated a bunch of conservancies together, right? And so they say for their marketing cost.
And these are conservancies that are not designed for the
Exactly.
purposes of
Yes.
getting
So
carbon
you
credits.
just layer on carbon credits as an additional feature, and then you say something like, "Oh yeah, wildlife protection," and like do not graze here, and all those very fun things that they like to add on top. So at the end of the day, the benefits never really get back down to the people who suffer the most because of the opportunity cost of participating in this whole carbon credit ecosystem. And maybe I don't know enough
So
about it, but from what I'm seeing, it's just another. I feel like it's a ruse.
So if I read you correctly, the problem here is that the people who are selling the carbon credits are not paying the price of producing that carbon credit. They pass that cost to the herders,
to the herders, to the communities,
who now
to the
have
people
to find
who now have
more
to find
places to graze. And
exactly
different
or
places.
limited scope.
Okay.
That at the heart of it for me is the biggest conversation that needs a lot more awareness.
Okay.
But yeah.